Hi, on today's show, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the connection between the globalists that's happening even at the moment on the planet, right down to New Age, and how they're actually connected and have the one main person in control of all of them, and that is the devil. So I expose that today.
Did you know that there is a world beyond what you can see with your physical eyes? How can you know what comes from the light versus the darkness? Alan Strudwick wants to help you discern God's truth from the dangers of false religion, false teachers, pseudoscience philosophies, and demonic influences waiting to deceive even the very elite. And now, here's your host of The Truth Project, Alan Strudwick.
Hi, welcome to The Truth Project. I'm Alan Strudwick. I've been really enjoying doing these shows for you. I'm just so excited about just equipping you, getting this information out. Some of this stuff, and I just need to be honest with you, some of this information I have not put anywhere else. So I'm just being led by the Holy Spirit to give as much as I can for you. But today, I'm extra excited, if there's such a word as that, and that is about talking about the connection of how did the New Age actually get into the West? How did all these things that I've been talking about and all these counterfeits actually end up in North America or even in the Western countries around the world? How did that start? So in order to do that, I've got to kind of go back, and I'm going to give you a little history lesson and give you a few little points. And most of this research I found out, as I'd said in one of the previous shows, how I spent 3 years going back through history and trying to find out where these New Age practices today, these New Age goddesses and spirits, and where did they come from? And because I'm trying to connect things for you so that you understand things, I want to be able to start a little bit of a history lesson here, probably around the late 1800s, 1900s. Now, some of you might have heard the term globalist. Basically, that's people that believe that they can run the world and run it as a global thing. When I was actually in the New Age and in some of those secret meetings I was in, there was a lot of discussion about how do we bring in this thing called the New World Order, and we'd use those names, or a one world religion. And we would discuss strategies of how do we actually get the people to understand that what we thought then was going to be best for everybody if we all ran it globally and we had one digital currency all around the world. So that's what the strategies were in these meetings. And I was privileged at that time to find out what the plans were. But it didn't start there, even though that was 30 years ago and a lot of the plans have been put out everywhere. That's not where it started. Where it actually started was with a man called Cecil Rhodes. In fact, he was an Englishman, and he believed that the British monarch needed to, how would I say this, that needed to take over the world. The British were involved in countries all over the world, from India to other places, South Africa. And this gentleman, he had a vision that he wanted to try and build the world up where a group of men like himself could actually run the world. I know that sounds interesting. A lot of movies are kind of made about that in comedies and sense. But this man, Cecil Rhodes, he was born in 1853 and then died in the early 1900s. I think it was 1902. And his whole vision, if you ever read any books, he was totally honest about what he was about. He totally wanted to run and have a group of men that could actually control the world. And he thought he was doing good. You remember when I was in the New Age, I thought that I was doing good and trying to help people and transform lives for a better planet and peace on the planet and those types of things. He felt the same way in the beginning. However, what happened is that he was not only a British, they called him a imperialist, because he believed in kind of taking over different territories and different countries for the British Empire. And he felt like the British Empire and the monarchy had now gone away from that as a goal, so he felt it was up to him to then take that goal on. And so he moved to South Africa, and his aim was to try and take over and run a lot of different small countries as well as large ones within Africa, or the continent of Africa, and claim them for Britain. In fact, he was even the Prime Minister in the southern part of Africa from 1890 to 1896. He was a self-proclaimed Prime Minister, and he controlled that region for Britain. But what happened is that he started to change. He started to get involved in that early 1900s, and I'll come back to that in a little bit and connect with the New Age beginnings as well. But he started to connect in what we would call spiritualism or occultism. And when he did that, he would experiment and have meetings and groups of friends come and see him, and they would have these secret meetings and they would experiment with similar things that I've talked about on other shows. They would experiment with channeling different spirits. They would try to talk to actually the prince of the air, which of course we know is the devil. And they believed in that type of spiritualism, but they didn't necessarily call it that it was demonic or evil. They thought it was just tapping into a spirit world. And so as they were tapping into this, of course, things started to happen. And at some point, Rhodes then was given a vision. And I believe he was given a vision from the devil and from demons. But he was given a vision that he could actually, with help of other men around the world, that they could actually take over the world. I know that sounds strange, but that's exactly, even in his own books and his own writings, he'll talk about that and admit that that's what he believed needed to happen. And he believed he needed to do it because he believed he was given the vision from our Lord. Now, we know that that's going to be the enemy. That's going to be the devil of doing that. And so he continued to follow that. Now, throughout the rest of his life, as I said, he would gather like-minded men, bring them to him, and they would have strategies and plans, and they would have meetings, to the point that he started to even control things in Britain. They even started a university there called Rhodes, which is a very interesting thing today. A lot of politicians that exist today and in the last 2 or 3 decades were actually had come out of Rhodes University in England, or were connected to the Rhodes Society, which was dedicated after Cecil Rhodes. So in one way, he's regarded, in most books, if you ever read the history about him, he's regarded as the modern globalist father of the movement. So he's the father of the modern globalist movement. And that's what he believed in. That's where this all started, in the sense of that we can have this new world order and one world religion and all of those types of things. All came from him, originally wanting to do it for Britain, but then over the times and periods of these meetings that they would have with these other like-minded men, they then started to become a little more, and I'll say this word, possessed, in the sense of the enemy and the demons that would be around them. And some of the things that have been recorded in certain books when they were in these meetings would be things that you would not really want to talk, and I don't really want to talk about them here either. But they're not from God, they're from the enemy. So, being the father of the modern globalist movement, then he knew at some point he was going to pass on, and he needed to be able to continue his legacy. He came back, I'm not sure what year it was, but he came back late 1800s into America around when the railroads were being built, and the Asians and the Chinese were there. And his whole aim of that was so that he could actually start to build a network throughout North America. Now, there's certain names that he then connected with back then, and that was the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds. He started to connect with all types of family members of these well-known families and very wealthy families, and he would connect with them and invite them to their meetings, to the point that even today, this movement that he started still has secret meetings, and sometimes they're quite open about it as well, and they're not that secret, throughout every year, of how they're going to change the world to the New World Order. Now, it wasn't until then, this is an interesting thing, I wanted to tie this back in, but at the same time, around those early 1900s, some of you might have heard of this man. His name was Carl Jung, who's probably regarded as the founder of psychology movement, or philosophy in that sense. He then wrote a foreword and got involved with a book called the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And yes, the title is about what it's about. It is very heavily on spiritualism and Eastern spirits and demonic spirits and everything else. He got involved with that, and then he started to head towards that same path. And then there was a connection between Rhodes and also with Carl Jung, and then many other people. So their main aim was that they would not just eventually take over the world. And of course, Rhodes died in 1902, so he never saw any fulfillment of what he thought. But what started to happen was that this group of men, slowly with different leaders over the years, started to build the right strategies of what they needed to do. One of those strategies, of course, was to control the world by, first of all, called media. So they were to buy up and start to work and finance media around the world so that they could control the propaganda. The second thing is that they wanted to control things such as railroads, such as oil, such as many other different things that were necessary, so that when they had control, when it came to the time that they actually could put this globalist movement into place, it would actually fall into place quite smoothly without anyone really probably knowing what had just happened, and the fact that they'd had almost 50, 60 years since Rhodes had died of actually implementing these strategies. In fact, one of the strategies, of course, was also how do they affect politicians? How do they get involved in that? One was they used to invite politicians that have gone, as I said, to Rhodes University, or they're part of the Rhodes Society in England, and connect to that. Here's another interesting thing. In the 60s, because I want to tie in the New Age to you and talk about how do you get that tied into it as well. In the 1960s, what happened was that Richard Nixon, when he was president, actually was coerced and, how will I put it, advised, if that's the right word, by this group to actually sign in the act, which was the Anti-Discrimination Act in the 1960s. I think it was 1963. But what happened is that when he signed that in, that allowed all of the Eastern gurus to be able to migrate and come into North America. And that was at the point after the 60s, the 70s, that we then start finding the whole New Age movement starting, the whole New Age movement building and developing. And the reason for this was that you have the globalist movement wanting to have a new world order, but at the same time they know that they can't control people or run people unless they actually have a one world religion. And so then that one world religion is the next thing that is then started when all of these gurus start to come. And of course the new world religion is related to the whole, how will I put it? It's related to the whole connection of the globalist movement, because they believe if they try to bring in a whole new world religion, there'll be people such as Christians who won't be able to handle it. And as I said in one of the earliest shows, that's when I got involved in the 70s and 80s when I was in these secret meetings, when it was all about how do we change and create a one world religion that will tie in with the one world order, and it'll all go together. So that was my job. That was one of the things I was initiated into with my guru, of how we would actually develop those strategies over the next 30 years to the point when it would come to an area and a time when it was, all right, now it's a time to start letting the world know that it's going to be much better off with a new world order or a new world and a one world religion. And look, you don't even have to believe me. You can actually today, if you have the time, you can look at the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds' different websites, and they'll blatantly say straight out now that that's their whole aim. They want a new world order. They believe the whole world will not survive with its population the way it is now. They have strategies for that, which I'll probably come to in the next show. But just to show you, I wanted to tie in that New Age is part of the whole globalist movement that was founded in that sense, so that as we move to the time and the season which it is now, that's the thing in the meetings that I was involved in that are now for this time.
Did you know that there has been a 30-year top secret plan conceived by Far Eastern gurus? This plan has been deceptively hidden in the New Age religion to try and convert Christians and Jews in the West to embrace the false gods of Hinduism and Buddhism. Over 2 decades ago, Alan Strudwick was chosen as a child to be trained by leading gurus in the Hindu religion, whose mission was to infiltrate the church and convert Christians into Eastern religions. Go to Amazon or log on to Alan's website, alanstrudwickministries.com, to get Alan Strudwick's eye-opening book, Authentic Awakening. In this book, Alan retells his life journey of deep entanglement with the New Age beliefs and practices that ends when he has a miraculous encounter with God the Father and Jesus. Understand how to avoid the dangers of the New Age, Hatha Yoga, Eastern meditation, astrology, reincarnation, aura cleansing, astral travel, psychic and palm readings, tarot cards, Reiki healing, and so much more. Understand how Christians flirting with New Age practices are committing the sin of spiritual adultery. Understand that yoga is a demonic gateway opening doors for spiritual attacks. Discover how to avoid being deceived by demons that pose as angels of light. Go to Amazon or log on to Alan's website, alanstrudwickministries.com, to get Alan Strudwick's eye-opening book, Authentic Awakening.
Welcome back. And as I just said in the previous segment, it's all connected. Everything from the globalist movement and the founding of that and the origins of what they wanted to do, and the New Age movement. So the New Age movement's not a separate thing and it's not another religion. It's actually a plan by the globalists and by other gurus and other people around to be part of running the world. Now, some of them, and I've met them because I was in the New Age with them in those meetings, some of them truly believe that that's the right thing to do and they feel they're doing it from their right heart. That's what I was like. As I said that before, I wasn't purposely evil. I was deceived by evil, but I was trying to carry out something that I had been brainwashed into believing and deceived by the enemy, that this was going to be the best thing. So some of these people, it's like, how do you deal with this? How do you talk to these type of people? What do you do with those type of people? But the first thing is just knowing at this stage that they are connected, and that's the aim of that connection. And then when in that 1900s, after Rhodes passed on, a lot of what was called theosophy and occultism and spiritualism that was in the East was actually brought by a few Westerners into the Western area from Europe to North America. And it was brought in then in the early days so that it could get slowly weaned in to the culture, to the point where it could end up where we are today, that people just think it's all normal again. But let me explain something. In the early 1900s, when you read some of these people and their books of bringing the spiritual practices of the East into the West, they actually warned the West of how bad these practices were. That's right, the ones that wanted to bring it in would actually warn it. There was a man called G.S. Arundel, and he wanted to bring, he was the one that sort of brought in the whole thing to do with spiritualism and yoga and empowerment by a higher spirit, which was just possession. But in his book, he actually warns people. He actually says, hey, if you get involved in this, you need to be aware that as we move in this, because he was talking about it as enlightenment. He thought it would bring enlightenment for the future of this whole globalist movement. But the interesting thing is that in his own book, he warns about how to be careful of all of these side effects of inviting these spirits into you. For example, he talks about that he believed in the future with this happening into the West, that there would be more heart attacks, there would be more anxiety attacks, there would be more depression, there would be more mental illness, there would be more skin diseases. He lists these whole things in the beginning of his book, saying that this is what is going to be in the future. And you have to be careful of that because that's the results of bringing in this extra power or spirit into you. And now all the globalists from Rhodes to even the other ones in the meetings, that's what they used to do because they believed the power was from the Prince of Air of the planet, which we know as the devil. But they believed that he was a lord that was going to help them run the planet. But the interesting thing is that this man, Arundel, warned everyone, but then in the rest of the book then says, but it's worth it because of the power you'll possess, because of the manipulation control that you'll be able to have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And where today, most of that stuff that was introduced that was quite heavy in the early 1900s has been slowly weaned down now, which I've explained in previous shows, to the point of, well, it's about this, and it's about the goddess, and it's about nature, it's about earth, it's about this. Watered down to the point that we, as a Western society, will just accept it all, not even knowing. And that's why I'm doing the Truth Project, to be able to show you the truth. That from the very 1900s, even Rhodes before that, in the late 1800s, the whole aim was to be able to combine a spiritual aspect for power to be able to bring in that globalist design or method or strategy to be able to eventually be able to run the world. And then some of them actually believed that was a good thing and some didn't. But it doesn't matter, is the fact of now as I said, we then fast forward to the 70s when we got involved in the New Age and was the initiate under the Guru. And then over the years, I started to find out more things. Even the inner circle with my Guru was very much into the globalist movement side and connected with many people in these meetings. Here's a side note that Holy Spirit's just asked me to let you know, and this is another interesting thing that's out there, which is deception, is in that 70s and 80s, one of the other strategies that we decided to do to try and convince people that it's all okay what we're doing and that everything we're doing is actually normal and it's not bad and it's not evil, we actually got actors. That's right, we got actors and actresses involved in our movement and what we were doing. So especially in the late 70s, there's many famous actors that I knew. They'd be in our meetings, and we would, how would I say this? We would initiate them into what we were doing, but we would initiate them into being spokespeople for us. Just like today, Tom Cruise is a spokesperson for Scientology, and so is, there's many other actors and actresses that are for Scientology. We did this exact same thing. I won't name them right now, but we had many actors that were famous. Some were Academy Award winners and things like that, that we actually had as part of our organization, so that when they were out and talking to newspapers and other places, they would then think we were credible. Isn't that an interesting thing? An actor who's paid probably millions of dollars not to tell the truth, to act, all right? They're told to act, and that's what they're paid for. We would get them to go and tell the public or say they were part of this movement or part of this and under this guru and everything else. And the reason they would do that, I mean, they're actors, so they did it well. Some believed it, some didn't. They all got paid for it. That's all that mattered. But the interesting thing is that the public thought we were credible because it was an actor saying it. Isn't it interesting how far our society has gone, where if an actor says, oh, this is really good, you should do this, that so many people flock to do it. They're the wrong heroes. That's why I'm doing this Truth Project, to try and bring out Jesus, the Messiah, as the real hero. And we'll talk more about discernment and things like that in a moment, or probably on one of the next shows. But I just wanted to explain more about that. Then once it got to the 70s, an interesting thing started to happen. And probably, how would I put it? It was actually a New Age. People go, how did the word New Age come into it? It was in the 70s when spiritualism, occultism, and everything that we were doing really got the term New Age. It came because all of our leaders were all known and went to one of their own meetings that I wasn't in, and they all came back and said that we were going to now bring in the age of Aquarius throughout the 60s and 70s into the world. So that was kind of like a new age that we were going to enter into. In fact, there was many types of things that were done in order for that. There was things like, how would I put it? There was a thing called the harmonic conversion, which everybody believed in the New Age then, that what would happen is that there was 5 portals around the world that were supposedly the key portals for this energy and for this spirit to come down. So all of us, all New Age people, we all flocked to these different portals. For me, I went to Mount Shasta, which was one of the portals that they believed was going to be where the convergence of the New Age would happen, and where everything would just, we would all be there together and wait, and, and away we went. And the interesting thing about Mount Shasta is that, and it's in Northern California, it is actually a mountain that in the New Age, they believe that the whole city of Atlantis actually lives there in the mountain. It's all deceptive. Some people say they've met these people, but it's just all demons disguised and whatever, and deceiving everybody. But they believe that that's a very strong portal to the whole thing of that harmonic conversion. So all of us were there and waiting, and of course then we all celebrated and all felt the spirit, whatever that was, but I know afterwards it was demonic. But then we believed there was this truly new age we were entering into. Now, that then was connected, just to finalize this back again, to the globalist movement. That was the connection. The whole thing was to produce a new age, that in this new age, within 2-3 decades, as I mentioned before, we would implement the strategies such as yoga, such as all sorts of other new age practices into becoming acceptable in culture, into becoming normal in culture. So that then at that point, people will then start to accept the fact, if it was then initiated, that there's now going to be a New World Order. And as that started to get initiated, there'd be a lot of people in the New World religion, which was really more the woke Christianity or the woke New Age, of being able to then accept what the globalists were wanting and bringing it to one world peace and one world movement, one world love and one world everything, one world currency, everything together. Because the whole thing in that of why you bring in a religion, and this was one of our strategies, the reason you bring in a religion is so that you have people that will then follow something that's not absolute. See, as a believer of Jesus, it's absolute. It's absolute. He went to the cross. It's absolute of what he did. It's absolute according to the Word of God of who he is and what he is. The whole idea of when we were trying to, and when I was in the New Age, of weaning a New World religion is to water everything down so there's no absolutes. You can do anything you want. You can have your lifestyle any way that you want it. And so then the globalists, once this was put into place, would then come and start to bring in their things and their ideals so that you will actually then accept what they're trying to put across. One of those things as well, here's another thing, I don't know if you've seen this, is the ads, because by the way, now the globalists are doing it. I know a few people that are still in the New Age that, they leak some stuff to me sometimes, but they're already starting to do it. There are signs all through Canada at the moment where they're talking all about, how will I put it? It's ads, and I'm sure you can get a hold of them if you Google them, but they're ads where they're saying, why do you need to own anything? This is to the whole general public. Why do you need to own anything? Why don't you just rent everything from us as the government? We will give you a place to live. We will have Amazon bring in our drones and bring stuff to you. You don't have to worry. The whole world will be peaceful. Your life will be peaceful, and you'll be happy. And some of the actors that are doing this, they go, oh, I don't need to worry about mortgage. I don't need to worry about debt. I don't need to worry about anything because I'm looked after by the government, and I am happy. These are actual ads that are starting to happen. Because this is the time that they're starting to implement it. Part of the whole pandemic was to be able to get people ready for that because there's no hope. See, with Jesus, as a believer of that, there's absolute hope, absolute hope. When you look at what the globalists are wanting to do, there's control, and it's not something that's happened in the last 5 years. It's not a conspiracy theory. I'd like to just put that out to you right now, that I know the truth because I was involved in what the plans would be. They're now being implemented, and so it's not a theory. You can call it conspiracy if you want, but it's not a theory. I know the truth. That's why I'm doing the Truth Project, wanting to just give you enough information so that you understand that this has been planned for hundreds of years. This is not something new, and we need to be able to find out what we do about that, and I'll start to touch on that on some of the news shows.
Log on to AlanStrudwickMinistries.com to connect with Alan, get questions answered, and submit your prayer requests. Download the ministry app and let Alan equip you and inspire you wherever you are. Find great teaching throughout his CDs, books, ebooks you can download, and more. And be informed with timely ministry, updates, and exciting interviews. Log on to AlanStrudwickMinistries.com.